Today we lost an icon, a legend in the world of professional wrestling. We have lost Hulk Hogan. Now, before we get into the video, I would just like to preference here that I will be speaking about Hulk Hogan the wrestler and what he did in the ring. I will not be talking about Terry Bollea the person or anything related to what he's done outside. This will be strictly out of respect for what he did in the ring for the industry. Now, I know, there's going to be some people that'll come on here and say some things, but I am preferencing this again. Just Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, and what he did in the ring. And you can't deny that this loss is huge for professional wrestling. This is much bigger than professional wrestling itself, right? Because if you go back, look back at the 80s with Hulk Hogan and Vincent Kennedy McMahon together revolutionized the world of professional wrestling and made it to what it is today. They modernized the concept of being in the world of professional wrestling, running an industry, bringing in not just thousands, but millions of people. The phrase Hulkamania runs wild, it ran wild in the 80s, and a lot of people ran with it. And I'm not going to say anything about some of the things about it because we're only looking at what he did for the industry. And moving forward to WrestleMania 1, 2, and 3. What was the big deal with WrestleMania 1, 2, and 3? Hulk Hogan was in the main event of WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 2, and WrestleMania 3. Yes, there was issues with WrestleMania when they started between Vince and Hogan, but ultimately it ended up becoming this biggest mega, the Super Bowl of professional wrestling, if you will. Because if you look at every other promotion, they always say that company's WrestleMania. Back in the days, they used to say that company's Hogan, that company's Hulk Hogan, right? He's done a lot, from multiple champions across many promotions, even going to Japan and proving back in the 80s, his haters, that hey, I can wrestle, but it's just they won't let me. And obviously, we could sit back and say, could he wrestle? Could he not? I will sit here and say, no, Hulk Hogan could not wrestle, but he was one of those very rare people that could speak on the mic so well. He had some of the best promo presence, some of the best mic skills that he elevated and hyped his matches beyond that. It's that old saying that a lot of wrestlers said, even wrestlers today that are veterans that make videos, speak and tell all the newcomers that the number one thing that's important, it's not just that you learned how to wrestle and know how to wrestle, it's how do you sell yourself? And to sell yourself is using the microphone. That's how you sell yourself and you sell the match. And Hogan was able to sell anything. He was able to sell hot garbage of a match and make it seem like it's the greatest thing that you can't wait to see. Like, for the longest time, WrestleMania 3 was this overly grand, hype match between Hogan and Andre, where years later, people have dissected it and realized the only reason was because Hogan was able to sell the match. Hulk Hogan's phrases: "Eat your prayers, say your prayers, eat your vitamins." What did that do? A lot of kids who grew up in the 80s, which I didn't, but I know a lot of them said that they did exactly that. Hulkamania runs wild. A lot of people wanted to run wild with him. My connection, my thing with Hogan stems in WCW because I grew up being a WCW kid. And I'm going to be the first, I'm not going to be the one to sit here and start bashing Hulk Hogan the wrestler, because obviously I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to lie about it that yes, I too was impacted by Hulk Hogan as a child. Yes, I was. and like I preferenced earlier, I'm putting aside the personal life, the political, everything aside to just look at the wrestler and what he did in the ring, and and I'm not gonna hide it that yes, he impacted me as a child in WCW because the birth of NWO, thanks to Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. Now, obviously, we know the original story was it was the Outsiders, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall coming in, and that's all it was going to be. But then Hogan and Bischoff came together and said, what if we make this better? And Kevin Nash and Scott Hall agreed to it. So he became the mystery third man at Bash at the Beach in 1996. And my very first ever match that I ever watched wrestling, I'll say this, the first ever wrestling match I ever watched was NWO versus the Steiners at NWO Sold Out. And no, I didn't get the pay-per-view because it was very expensive at the time. So I watched the replay that they showed on TV. And my dad turned on the TV and he goes, look, 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 you think you'll like this. The guy there on TV, the guy, big mustache, Hulk Hogan, think he's good. The big guy, tall guy, Nash, good guy. And those the brothers over there, very good too. So that was my first ever thing. And that's also why I fell in love with the Steiners as well. Because there's a connection there with the Steiners. Why I kind of got an emotional attachment to also Kevin Nash and Scott Hall a little bit. Because it was like my first I watch of professional wrestling. And then I followed the NWO, when NWO blew up. I wasn't the biggest black and white fan, I'll admit it, but I was a Wolfpack fan. And if it wasn't for Hogan and Bischoff coming up with the idea to expand and grow the Outsiders to NWO, there would be no Wolfpack because I am a Wolfpack kid for life. Like, I'm a Wolfpack kid at heart. I will sit there and say NWO Black and White was great. NWO Black and White was probably one of the biggest factions in professional wrestling history. But for me, once a Wolfpack hit, it was everything. It was game changer. And then even hearing the fact that Hulk Hogan joined Wolfpack, because I learned about Hogan joining Wolfpack when I got the game WCW versus NWO Thunder, right? And in that game, Hogan comes out. If anyone who's played that PS1 game, it's a later. I'm not going to say late release, but a later release in WCW's lifespan, if you will. And you had Wolfpack at the time, right? So some of the names you had was like, you had an option for like Black and White Sting or Wolfpack Sting, Black and White Kevin Nash or Wolfpack Kevin Nash. But they're originally where they were. And Hogan had an option to be in Wolfpack as well, because this came out right at the time where Hogan just turned to Wolfpack, right? So it was like that's where I learned from it, and I used to hear his phrase that he used to say, "I'm a trick 'em." I trick him once and I'm gonna trick him again, and he was pointing at other names, and then Kevin Nash's funny statement in that game, because in that game, for anyone who hasn't played that game, you could hear reasons why you should pick them kind of video that they put. Kevin Nash says, "Don't pick me, go pick someone else like Hogan, go, just pick Hogan, go," because it was funny, and I was like, whoa, Hogan? So they were really pushing Hogan, and I get it, because he was like the face of WCW at the time. It wasn't until I got older when I learned that Hogan had a big impact and helping hand in killing WCW, along with Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo. I won't even say Kevin Nash or Scott Hall, because yes, they had creative freedom, but it wasn't to the extent of Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo, like that level of what they got. But it didn't deteriorate me from that. It was more like, okay, at least because I got into WWE later, because I was a big WCW kid, never watched WWE. Also, when Goldberg came out, I was like, yay Goldberg, boo NWO. Because I like Goldberg more than NWO, but once Wolfpack happened, I started liking Wolfpack more than I liked Goldberg at the time. Even Scott Steiner, when he joined, I was like, but yeah, all of that stems because Hulk Hogan did what he did. And if it wasn't for him, well, I might be a different wrestling fan, you know? When Hogan returned in 2005, because I came to watch WWE, if anyone has seen and videos that I talk about, I mentioned that the first time I saw WWE was when I saw Austin and Booker T in a grocery store, because I loved Booker T, right? And then I saw Kane get unmasked. Then when I became a weekly watcher was like mid to late 2004. Hogan wasn't there. Then Hogan returned at WrestleMania 25 and I popped for him. And the first thing that I remember when Hogan returned and I popped, I was how old was I? I can't even remember when WrestleMania 25 happened because it was so long ago, but I think I was either between the age of 13 and 15. Somewhere in that age range was when WrestleMania 25 happened. And I remember vividly where I was. I was in my dad's old house. The people that were renting the basement at that time, they had a black box. For any of my younger viewers who don't know what a black box is essentially like you get free cable, you get free satellite. They had the American network and they had pay-per-view. And the husband who was in the basement, who lived in that basement, loved wrestling. The wife watched it from time to time with him. So when he found out that I liked wrestling, goes, "Oh, WrestleMania happening. You come down, we watch WrestleMania together. All four of us." So we went down, and I remember when Hulk Hogan came out, I was like, "Oh my God, is that who I think it is? Yes, it's Hulk Hogan." I lost my cool, and he even said, "Oh, Hulk Hogan still wrestle?" And then when I asked him, I go, "You don't know? You don't know?" And he goes, "I missed maybe 2 year. I stop. 1 2 year I stop." I go, okay. And then I looked to my dad and I was like, "Wait, NWO? Oh my God." Because then it brought back memories of me being such a big fan of NWO, bringing me memories of, you know, what what he did with NWO, and then brought back memories of the Wolfpack, and then reminded me about the Wolfpack Kevin Nash shirt I had. And by the way, off topic here, if anyone has that NWO Wolfpack Kevin Nash shirt, I am looking for it because that was the very first ever wrestling shirt I ever owned. Anyways, but going back to Hogan, I was like happy to see him back. And for a time being, one of my top song wrestling themes was the Real American theme. Because personally, I did not like. Growing up as a kid, I could not stand the NWO theme. Both the Jimi Hendrix Voodoo Child and the other version, I couldn't stand it because I loved Wolfpack's theme. But I couldn't stand black and white theme. So, but when he did Real American, I liked it. And I even remember that year, he had the match at SummerSlam with Shawn Michaels. My dad's favorite wrestler of all time is Shawn Michaels. And me and him got to a heated argument as to who's better, Hulk Hogan or Shawn Michaels. I kept saying Hulk Hogan. He was saying, no, Shawn Michaels better, Shawn Michaels better. Shawn Michaels do this, do that, do this, do that. What Hulk Hogan do? All he do is this. And I'm like, yes, I get it. Shawn Michaels, whatever. But as I got older, I realized my dad was right about in-ring. Because my dad was arguing about an in-ring performer. He wasn't looking at what Hogan did for the industry. He was looking at in-ring performer. And also, he was being biased because Shawn Michaels is his favorite wrestler of all time and still to this day is. But yeah, we had this heated argument. I was upset when I went to watch the SummerSlam. The match didn't happen because this was at the time where the WWE title or the World Heavyweight title, depending which pay-per-view it was. Because remember, the brand split. It was always the main event. I was upset that the match didn't happen. And then when the WWE title match finished as a co-main event, they went off to something else, and then they went to something else, and then they went to something else. I was upset that the match wasn't going to happen. I was like, oh no, I wanted to see Hogan beat Shawn Michaels. And then match happens, right? But then after that, I kind of was like, that's when I learned about Hogan. He's a terrible wrestler. Come on. Well, I don't know why I was all up in arms about Hogan. Yes, NWO. But Come on, the guy sucked in the ring, and I'm not taking away from the impact. It's just my thing was I started being like, I started realizing after that was like, oh, Hogan's not as good as everyone says he is in the ring. Because also my dad brought up the whole Shawn Michaels stuff, and I was like, okay, it makes sense. Years later, Hogan goes to TNA. He has a big impact going to TNA, but same thing he did in WCW. He got the exact same treatment. And what did he do? He screwed the Carters over with that same treatment. But, but, one thing Hogan did do is raise the TV ratings for TNA to the highest it's ever been in history. During Hogan's time in TNA, the TV ratings for TNA was the highest it's ever been. And that should tell you the impact that Hulk Hogan had. Not Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, had in the industry, that he was able to come in, screw the company over, screw the Carters over, but yet make it the highest rating that the company's ever had. Also, Hogan made the biggest mistake because Hogan was the one who brought up the idea, because Hogan was brought in as vice president, co-vice president with Eric Bischoff, right? Because at the time, the president was Dixie Carter. Okay, and what was his idea? Let's compete with WWE. So they put one show on Raw against Raw, and it was the lowest rated show that TNA's ever had. And then Hogan realized, let's never compete with them again, and made that mistake. Don't make that mistake again. And what did they do? They went right back up to ratings again. So Hogan had like a mixed bag when it came to being in TNA. The story that he had in TNA was a mixed bag as well. You know, the story with him against the Aces and Eights, him against Sting, him against his own daughter, him against Bully Ray. It was weird. It was a weird time for TNA, but you can't deny anywhere he went at that time, ratings went up. You know, his impact was everywhere. I even remember at one point, and I'm not going to put Hogan in that same category anymore, but in school, I remember this. In one of the projects was pick a hero to do, right? And do a research and do something, and they said, and my teacher, I remember, said, not your hero, a hero, like a hero to the world or society or something, not just your hero. So I was like, okay, I want to do Muhammad Ali, but someone already beat me to the punch to it, because the rule was if that what was it? If that person was taken, you can't do it. So then I said Hulk Hogan, and they're like, no, you can't do Hulk Hogan. I go, but I tried to defend him at that time, and this was in 2005. I believe, or 2005 or 2006, I tried defending him and saying without Hogan, wrestling wouldn't be where it is. I go, Hogan and Vince McMahon together made wrestling what it is today. Now, obviously, I know a lot of backstage problem with Hogan. A lot of wrestlers didn't like him and still don't. But putting all of that aside, by the way, I wasn't able to do the project on Hogan because he's not a hero to society. He's just something that did in an industry. He didn't break outside of his industry like, say, Muhammad Ali, or like she even brought up Kobe Bryant, because Kobe Bryant did a lot outside of basketball as well. And I was like, okay, that's fine. It has to be for the whole world. Got it. So anyways, so I ended up not doing Hogan. But anyways, I know there's a lot of hate around Hogan. I know the past few years there's been a lot of negativity towards Hogan, and I'm not going to talk about that. Hulk Hogan, all I'm going to say is Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, not Terry Bollea. Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, changed professional wrestling forever, and we should be thankful that Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, not the human being, the wrestler, came and did what he did. So I'm going to say rest in peace to Hulk Hogan, but not for Terry Bollea.